Hello, and you're very welcome to a little Irish League podcast called Kicking Match. My name is Peter Cinnamon, and I will be your guide as we dissect all the latest game week action. From the Blues feeling blue to the Reds seeing red. Larne and Glentoran are here. They don't concede goals, so you better get used to it. Elsewhere, as the nights get colder for some managers, their seats are feeling rather warm, and I don't think it's because their clubs have invested in self-heating chairs. Otherwise, they'd probably be starting them up top the way their season have been going. If a 13-year-old can play in the League Cup, why can't a piece of furniture start in the league? Their YouTube highlights are solid, and you might be surprised to know they have a rather impressive LinkedIn account. There's an Alan Key joke in there somewhere, but of course Curtis is way too busy scoring goals at Carrick to try and put some dead wood together. Oh, and Ballymena didn't blow it at home against 9 men, so hey, there has been some progress. And for what was one of the biggest weekends of the season so far, I know you've been asking for it, and I'm here to deliver a big weekend, needs a big name, and he's finally going to be here to review a game week. It's the return of the man from the score, broadcaster and commentator, Michael Clarke. Hello.
Thank you for the very kind introduction, Peter. Good to be back on the programme.
You're so big, Louis Walsh should be picking you out as your talent agent, and there's a tick for my boys' own reference this time round. Michael, I am really delighted to have you here because we were chatting last week on the pod just how it felt like this weekend of fixtures could be the time where everything ignites. It's fireworks season, and boy did we see it on the pitch this weekend, quite literally in one game. And I wanted to have you here as you're a man that has seen this league over numerous years. You're in it, you know the score, and for yourself, are you with me in saying it's really has started to kick off? That was for both ends of the table, even stuff in the middle. It's starting to get juicy, and I am here for it.
Yeah, it's massively exciting. Let's give Larne their place because they're the table toppers. People were looking at this as a bit of a litmus test for them coming up against Cliftonville, who, as has been well rehearsed by this point, lost the league by a point last year, and people were wondering if they could go one better this time around. And it's far too early in the season to assess how likely it is for Cliftonville to be able to achieve that. But what we can say is that Larne are showing a lot more staying power. And it wasn't, I don't want to say words like resilience and things like this, because it wasn't that sort of win for them on Friday. It was a comprehensive 4-0 victory against Cliftonville. And you have to say, it seems like the answer to how they're doing it is very smart recruitment and getting players that understand the league, but also suit what they're trying to achieve. And in the past, they've been accused of being a bit lightweight, a bit predictable, having a very gorgeous and pretty plan A, and then not so sure where to find the kitchen sink in order to throw it. Whereas this time around, it feels like they've got the plans to the house and they know how to open all the doors, and they're showing us their full array now. So Larne have impressed me. And then I haven't mentioned it yet, but I feel like we will be talking about it. There's a small matter of what happened at Windsor Park.
Any other week, I think we will be going straight to Denver and talking about that game. You talk about Super Sundays. Mega Friday was going down that day. I can't believe both of those games happened on the same night, but for such incredible and newsworthy stuff to happen was unbelievable, and Twitter was alight all weekend from it. But we have to go to the game that saw over 7,000 people be there. The atmosphere was electric from the beginning, and what went down on the pitch was, I would say it's shocking, but a lot of people had an inkling that this could be a time where Glentoran really arrived. They really surprised Linfield, and Glentoran have had a brilliant run against Linfield over the past number of games. But Glentoran going into Linfield's house after such a sketchy season Linfield have had so far, and how brilliant and dominating Glentoran have been, many felt it was only going to go one of two ways. It was going to be Linfield finally showing up, or Glentoran really proving that they could be the world beaters this season and that they are charging towards that title, and someone's going to have to stop them. And it was the latter. 3-0, an incredible performance from the very get-go. That is Mick McDermott's signature win. Easy, bar none. They were standing tall at the end of that game, and Linfield looked completely dejected. I have seen fewer big game performances in the Irish League as good as Glentoran were, and particularly at the end of last season, where they were just so down and out and looked as though they had the skill and the ability, but they didn't have that mindset and the mental fortitude to really seal the big games. They looked scary on Friday night, and there's no one that probably feels more scared and has seen more of a ghost than David Healy and Linfield. Just how good was that from Glentoran on Friday night?
It was exceptional. I thought they were the better team for almost all the 90 minutes, if not the full match. Linfield were struggling. They were picking up very cheap yellow cards. You could maybe ask a question about whether Newry's sending off was a little harsh. Certainly the first yellow is a definite. He commits a professional foul after being caught out of position after slipping on the ball. The second one, I don't really know that there's much he could do. I don't think it's a cynical foul. I don't think it's intentional obstruction. I just think he can't get out of the way. But people say, well, that's the moment and all the rest of it. But I'm not so sure. Linfield's one great chance, which I wouldn't even say was a great chance in terms of an easy one or anything like that. It was just so well carved out. Was Cooper cracking one off the crossbar? But apart from that, Glentoran had the better opportunities and looked really dangerous. They got a slice of fortune with a big deflection for Burns' shot from distance. And then when the corner came in and Johns didn't deal with it and it gets converted, you think, well, it could be any score now at this stage, because I feel at that point the game was completely dead and buried. I didn't feel Linfield had a chance. They didn't offer enough going forwards. So, yeah, it was really, really strong stuff from Glentoran. They were, scary is the word you used, and I think that's right. If you were another team watching that and going, okay, well, they've just done this at Windsor Park, that is scary. We don't necessarily fancy ourselves coming up against that. And to be fair, it shows you the effectiveness of Danny Purkis, because when he was signed, I asked the question, what did they intend on doing with him? Because I didn't see him being a starting player, and it's not, a reflection on my thoughts on his ability. It's just how many attackers they already have at the club, and most strikers that sign for Glentoran aren't a starting player because of the amount of players they have. So, was he going to be happy to sit on that bench? Well, I'll tell you what, if he can keep doing that, he'll be very happy, because he'll have silverware at the end of the season. So that's what we're honestly talking about. I mean, we have to remember it's very early in the campaign, and there's a number of teams in and around it, and Linfield are by no means, despite being further back in class at the moment, have still plenty of time to play catch up and good form for doing so. So Mick McDermott, to me, showed a bit of wisdom in trying to calm the players down after a wee bit of the celebrations, because some people might have thought that they'd won the league if they just saw the pictures. If you just turned on your TV on the BBC Two and you went, well, if they won the league already, is it over? And that's the thing where, yes, it's a statement victory. Yes, I understand the passion. Yes, I understand where they've been and where they are, but they will need to keep producing that, and that'll be what they're judged on at the end of the season, is whether they're later ridiculed for that celebration or whether people say that's just great team belief and that was them. They knew from the get-go that they were good enough. But Linfield must improve, because they were badly off the pace, and not for the first time this league season, it must be said.
Team belief and solidarity are definitely the words I would use, and it felt as though there was something cathartic about that victory for Glentoran, be it the fact that they had such a poor end the last season, or just how much of a big summer this was for Linfield, or just how people have talked about them being in this limbo and said, oh yeah, they're up for the title. But for many people, I feel as though it's been feeble words. It's like, they've got the players, but can they put it all together? They are putting it together, and we can start ticking off all the stats that everybody in our position are saying. They've only conceded one goal all season. That is just incredible. They go to Windsor, a place where I think I heard a while ago where, like, I think Linfield hadn't been behind for the guts of a season. Like that, Linfield, that was Fortress Windsor for a long, long time. And look, they've had a little jab on the nose, and it's going to hurt. But where Glentoran go from here is going to need to be exactly the way you said. You look at the next game and you think, you cannot let this energy just just filter out. You're right. Of course they haven't won the league. 9 points is an incredible gap. But I do want to highlight some of these players. Danny Perkins, what a presence he has. Every time he's come on, he's looked strong on the ball, hard working, and the difference I've seen in this team for Glentoran this season is Shane McCartan's finally found his role in this team and was working really diligently. Plum seems to be back to his best again and incredible on set pieces. That back line from Wilson to Kane, like, they've just got it down. And Linfield were so restricted when it came to their chances. And one thing about it was watching that game is they came out of the traps. They absolutely did. They had the energy, they had the fight, they were chasing down every second ball. And you kind of thought this is the tactics from the more immature team. They're going to get caught in the moment and they're going to get caught out. But they didn't. And ultimately, Linfield were the team that didn't have that maturity, didn't have that poise and assurance. And the final thing I'll say about Glentoran on this point before we jump on to Linfield, because they are the other side of this story, is that so far they have really answered their critics. Right now, is it too bold to say if they don't win the title, it's a bit of a, not disaster, but they've set themselves up now and they need to keep this going because it will feel like a real gut punch for their fans, I think, after such a big win. And look, they're going to have to play Linfield 3 more times, at least in the league. But they're thinking about it. And when they're thinking about what colour ribbons is going to be on that Gibson Cup, little things can creep in. So that's going to be the task now. But let's go Linfield. I think David Healy's had a tough season since the RFS game. And even beforehand, I would argue, how must their fans be feeling right now? Because there's the typical Twitter chat of, I found the Healys out. I found them. They weren't hard to find. But they just weren't at it.
Well, doesn't that show you, and people are going to mistake this for me being a Linfield fan, and I'm absolutely not. I'm a Carrick Rangers fan, and I just point that out because of what I'm going to say. It shows you the standard to which Linfield are held, because David Healy's won the league 5 times in the last 6 seasons, and there are still people that want to try and convince you that he's some sort of fraud or failure, which to me is absolutely ridiculous. So, full perspective required here. Everyone, I think, when they're doing their predictions at the start of a season, says, well, if you come above the Blues, you'll probably win it. And that is still the standard bearer for the league and where it is at. And that is why those Glentoran players celebrate it. Last September, Linfield went to the Oval and won 3-0. So fast forward a year and they're going, our turn. And there's a difference in feeling about things. And Linfield looked a little flat. What was incredible is, when I was looking through the games that both teams have played in terms of competitive matches, I'm not interested in the preseason friendlies. Although, if you wanted to talk about those, Linfield beat Qatar, which is still
So does that mean Glentoran should be going to the World Cup? Is that the crack? Is that how that logic works?
Glentoran will host the next World Cup, I think. So just them. But Linfield have played twice as many games as Glentoran this season. They've played 22 compared to 11. So maybe some of the lethargy and things like that is a little bit of an early season burnout with some of the players. And I'm not making excuses for them. They need to be better. They need to find a way of managing that. But, they've had the Champions League, Europa Conference League, the Charity Shield, the SPFL Trust Trophy, if that's the current intonation of its name, keeps flipping changing. And they've got the league and everything else. So it's just full on. It's been a bit hectic for them, and they have not found their stride. Win a couple, something happens. Win a couple, something happened. It seems to keep being stop-start, and they need to find a way to change that, and they need to find that answer soon, because if they go on a run all the way through up to Christmas, then we're saying, hey, look, they're back in the race. If they drop points from another couple of matches, people will rightly say, well, they could already be out of it. And that's the thing, when you look at the league table now, Linfield have lost 3 times already. They've only played 8 league games.
I know.
So that's not good reading. Larne are still unbeaten. Glentoran are still unbeaten too. So Linfield have a very slim margin for error for this point, Peter.
Well, I do want to get on this point because what's being said online by Linfield fans, they are clearly frustrated and they have their own thoughts and criticisms. And I agree, you cannot say that David Healy is a bad manager, but I do think there is fair assessments that I'm seeing online, and from what I can see as a neutral, that I do think David has to address. Big games, he's not delivering. He's not setting the team out well, and the results are saying that, because you can chalk up the RFS stuff, but look, that first leg, the players didn't manage the game well. They ultimately did blow it in that game. They were lucky to get past TNS, regardless of how much they pushed forward. And they come up against Glentoran, and it felt as though those players didn't have the composure and the assuredness that you really required. They were getting those silly yellow cards, and they were silly. And anybody that was watching the first 15 minutes of that game could tell you there's a red card in here somewhere, and it's going to be from those silly yellows. And they let Glentoran come on to them. There is regardless if it's just trying to find themselves again, but at the minute they're not doing it in the big games. And even from a lower level, they let that lead slip against Crusaders. So that's one thing where they have to address that. The other side of it is, I imagine if you're a fan, you're listening to things like this and you're hearing everybody going, yes, it's not working out for McDaid right now, but he's a good player. That's great. That's fine. I agree. But results, at some point, if you're a fan, you've got to go. The results are not going our way. We've lost 3 out of 8. We're not scoring a lot of goals. At what point do you change? And again, that's on David. And maybe the answer is you got to stick it out. Because that's the thing. Sometimes you don't know when you're not getting the results. Do you need to trust the process, or do you need to change? It's stick or twist. If you're a Linfield fan saying, we want the twist, I think you're totally in the right to do that. And maybe putting McDaid out there even more is causing even more pressure on him. And perhaps formation-wise, that's another thing. The pressure is on David Healy unlike ever before, because he's not getting those wins against the big teams, and it's probably because they're not getting the ball in the back of the net, not scoring the goal. I think there will be a reaction, but they have already lost their slippage, haven't they? From losing against Carrick, drawing against Coleraine, and losing against Crusaders. You don't have to win every game to win this league, but I think it's fair to say David needs to have a look and tinker at the least.
Yeah, they're not going to be happy with where they are at present, and there's no denying that whatsoever. I think, the European thing, I don't know whether it was necessarily the game management in Europe, because they're 2-0 up, they get a poor decision against them. The other team score from the corner that should have been a goal kick. And then, I don't know, to me, it's the players need to just go, right, okay, fine, that happened. And the players didn't do it. The manager's not on the pitch at that point. So the second goal is the players getting caught in the moment. They then get eliminated by the last kick of the ball being a dreadfully unlucky own goal, which could the manager have done anything about? 9 times out of 10 that gets put out. I think the fair criticism comes domestically of them. Getting beat by Carrick Rangers is something that they didn't see coming. But equally,
neither's on half the league, but there's what are you joking?
I was going to say, but look at how well Carrick are doing at the moment. They've won half of their matches. They've played 10 in the league and they've won 5 of them. So they're not doing too badly. Now, I know they've also come on the end of some heavy beatings. So that's where, fans will look and go, oh, how can they go and thrash them and how come we can't? But then you could extend that to how come Dungannon only get beat 1-0 by Linfield or Glentoran and get pumped by nearly everyone else?
Yeah.
Football is not so easy as that. And if it was, we would hate it. So I think there are fine margins. Linfield are on the wrong side of them, and it's a very bad look. But I don't think that you can condemn them too harshly at the moment. I think the greater perspective will come in time, where you see every team goes through a bad patch in a season. Glentoran were awful at the start of last season and nearly won the league. So I always try to be fair to managers and players in that regard, because I've seen it happen before, where after 8 or 9 games, people, I understand it. We're all passionate. We're all fans. People are wanting somebody to get sacked in the morning, and then by the end of it, you're in love with them again until you're not. So to me, Linfield have a lot of work to do. David Healy is under pressure. The players are under pressure, and the jury is out. However, I don't actually think they're as far off it as maybe some believe.
Well, scoring goals is going to have to be something that they start doing, because they've struggled, and that's not all on the man that, as we mentioned, loads. And it's perhaps a formation thing.
they've scored 2 goals fewer than Larne and played a game less. So are they doing that badly? You know, that's when you start to look at it and you go through the numbers. They're losing games by fine margins. They've conceded 8. Larne and Glentoran have between them conceded 3. So you could say, well, Linfield have conceded a goal a game, and that's not good enough. I think that shows you the standard in the league at the moment. Actually, is that tight?
It does feel like one of the strongest 12 teams we've ever had, and the Glens go marching on, and Linfield go back into the drawing board, and back to the drawing board is what Tiernan Lynch had to do this summer at the end of last season. And you rightfully said it there at the start of the podcast, talking about everybody saying it's plan A, and if it's not plan A, it's plan A again. Perhaps they've found plan B, and it's plan bonus. He has arrived. The £100,000 man has said, I'm here, and perhaps we need to play him for 5 minutes. A hat-trick, an incredible performance from him. A statement win in itself there for Larne. 4-0 against Cliftonville. Incredible. Larne have been chugging along this season and have been getting on with their business quietly and efficiently. On Friday, they did it with a bit of pizzazz. That is them saying they're here, and I think they're ready to challenge. They're in the conversation. A disappointing loss for Cliftonville, no doubt, but the credit has to go to Larne. It looks as though everything's starting to come together, and I just want to see a repeat of that Glentoran Larne game again, and it won't be too far away. What for you has impressed you most about this Larne team this year?
Do you know what I'm thinking? I haven't actually seen anyone go with the Brucey bonus, and that seems like such a tap-in of a headline, doesn't it, actually? Because Kenny Bruce obviously was a big fan of his, as is Tiernan, and the two of them agreed and went and got their man. They needed to get that checkbook out. I think actually it's the players that they brought in. For me, no one has been better for Larne than Leroy Miller.
Absolutely.
I always have rated him. He's an engine. He's just everything that I think they were missing in many ways, because we know what they already had to offer in midfield. They had creative players. They had Sule, and Sule was very good the other night as well, from everything that I've heard. But I always felt a little sorry for him, that he was expected to do nearly all the running, all the mopping up, and then let a few other people be the artists. And it's like, well, you've got a bit of reinforcement in there now, and there's someone that's going to be able to go box to box and do more for the team in midfield. So I just think they were able to answer that question. Sean Want has added something to their defence, and Paul O'Neill has slotted into their attack really well. You know, sometimes football isn't as complicated as we all try to make it. Strengthen the personnel you have on the pitch, and you might actually be a stronger team. That's what they've done. It sounds easy. It's often quite difficult. And what was, to me, very interesting is because, I'm sorry for plugging, but on the score last week, I had Tomas Cosgrove, and he was talking about, the fact that he feels that they have done better. And I said, I'll be honest with you, when I saw some of the players you were letting go, I thought it might be a step backwards. And he said, probably quite a few people did, maybe even internally. We were looking at a few of the guys that were leaving and going, couldn't we have done with one or two of them sticking around? But at the moment, it is working out for them. So you have to, as things stand, say credit to the decision makers for making tough decisions.
It's not always about, when it comes to rebuilding a team recruitment, it isn't always just let go of the players when they're already after their peak and bring in new ones. Sometimes you have to look at a certain amount of cash and go, this can only go 3 ways. You can only have so many people in the chairs, and I think clearly they looked at it and said, we can have McDaid and we can have Hale, or we can go Leroy Miller and we can go for O'Neill. And they went for that, and so far it's working for them, and those other players are doing pretty well on their own right. But you've got to think what's best for Larne, and so far this is what's best for Larne. They are a compact team. They're a clearly hard-working team. They're very calm and poised. I'll use that word poised. That's what they are for me. The one worry I would have is if And of course, when injuries come, I can name you right now their starting 11 and it looks strong and they're ready to go. But what if O'Neill or Bonus goes down? Lusty or Kearns coming in? That's a downgrade. If you were to lose the likes of Miller or Cosgrove, that's a big blow. And in many ways, we've seen that with a team like Crusaders. They haven't had Ben Kennedy. They've been without Heatley recently. It's squad game more than ever, and how they balance will be how close they will push up. But there's two managers at the start of this year, at the end of last year, and we start the programme with them. Lynch and McDermott were the most talked about and criticised managers in the league, and boy have they answered their critics really, really well.
And I think that's the point. Sorry, Peter, isn't it? That's the point. That is how quickly things can change in football, and that is why ultimately whoever is the chairperson of a football club needs to have, or the owner needs to have, a bit more about them than worrying what people think on Twitter.
Well, I'm sure if this was live, there would be a little light flashing above me, and it would be Cliftonville Twitter saying, yes, 4-0, that's all good. But of course, they were down to, 10 men. Cliftonville were down to for a guts of half this game when Sean Moore got a red card. Regardless, it was Larne's night, and they're sitting top of the table. Very exciting for Larne, and Cliftonville aren't out of this yet, clearly, but a disappointing loss, and they'll have to go again and try and find these big results. They'll need it. You can only have so many going down. But there was also big games at the bottom of the table, and there probably were fewer bigger games than what went down at Shamrock Park. This is the earliest I've talked about a Portadown game in this podcast so far this season, and for Portadown fans, it's not going to be for the right reasons. 5:30 kickoff. They only had 1 point going into this game, Portadown, going against a key relegation rival in Newry, a team where there's a bit of a spicy divide, a bit of rivalry growing there, and Portadown took the lead. Everything looked good. Alberto Balde with the goal after missing a number of one-on-ones. But Newry came back. In fact, I keep saying Portadown have shot themselves in the foot. Nothing screams shooting yourself in the foot quite like conceding a penalty a minute after you've just scored. But Portadown are going to Portadown this season. They concede that. They let Newry into the game. And Newry eventually run out 3-1 winners. Huge result for Newry. And a bit like there has been, unfortunately, at the last days of a number of Portadown managers over the past 5 years, the boos rang out in Shamrock Park as the final whistle goes. This has been a tough season for Paul Doolan, and the pressure is really starting to mount. Let's talk about Newry very quickly. 10 games gone, 9 points. I think they would have taken that at the start of the season, no?
Yeah, most certainly. It's a good start to the season for Newry City. And the thing is, if Portadown or Dungannon are any way better, Newry City are, we're talking about this differently and we're framing it differently, and Newry could have the same amount of points. And that's sort of the fallacy sometimes in football. If either of the two teams below Newry City looked a bit more convincing, you'd be going, well, is 9 points from 10 games going to be enough? But because Dungannon and Portadown have 4 points between them after a combined total of 20 matches, because between them, they've won one game. Between them, they've drawn one game. They've lost 18. I mean, they're absolutely both stinking the place out at the moment. Between them, conceded 49. Between them, haven't even scored 10. It's absolutely inconceivable how desperately poor their starts to the season have been. And I know that sounds like I'm going in two-footed, but they're facts. You could combine them, and they're still not as good as what Newry City have been. So yes, Newry City will be more than happy with how the start of the season has gone. They've won 3 of their matches. It's not a bad return. There are things they'll probably want to improve, but they could also point and say, well, some of our best players haven't been available to us. We don't have a big squad. We're not blessed with a big budget. We can't just rotate 3 or 4 boys week in, week out. So, yeah, I think you have to say they have a manager that I rate very highly in Darren Mullen, and they're doing what I actually expected them to do when they got promoted, which was give this a right old rattle this season, and it's a bit brave, but I think you could nearly call it now and say that you've seen enough to suggest that they're more than capable of staying in this league, and it's the other two teams below them that absolutely must up their game, and the team that they're joint on points with, albeit they've played a game more, Glenavon, will need to find other gears too. But no, Newry City, from where they've been and what they've done, yeah, they've impressed me.
They're a unique team in this league because I do think they have their limitations, but they're very well aware of this. And when you're up in this league and it's all about the one season, you've got to attack it in a way that you can get exactly what you need. And what you need out of the season is to finish at least 11th, but hopefully higher. And they somewhat remind me of like maybe somebody trying to play a fighting game with maybe a broken controller or like half like a fight list. They only can do so much, but they know what they need. They have that uppercut and they're going to spam it. They're going to play on the back and they're going to play on a counter, and they know that's kind of the best move they have, and it's the most effective thing they do. And they're just doing it. You know, it's exactly how they tore apart Glenavon. It's exactly how they've now beaten Portadown, and they were able to take care of business against Dungannon. And they've got exciting players at the top. They're a bit sketchy when it comes to the wing backs and maybe in the centre of the park, but they're getting the results.
You've just reminded me of how I used to use Blanca in Street Fighter.
Michael Clarke, I knew you would get that reference because I know you'd be like you'd be an Eddie in Tekken 3. Just spin the legs. Here, look, it's working.
I have a strat and I'm just going to do this.
I don't know then what Portadown would be. As last week in the pod, you talk about going in 2-footed. Hold my drink as I talked to Stephen Beacom and I give it all these stats saying this Portadown team right now is very easily on course to be statistically the worst ever team in the 12-team league, the 15 years that it's been about. I think now I'm going to divert from that. I think they have to prove to me that they're not. 1 point after 10. We're nearly once around the sun when it comes to the league. Paul Doolan at the start of the season talked about his recruitment issues. He then said that they were only played against the top 6 teams. That's correct. They've now played against 4 of the 5 bottom. Obviously, they're one of them. And they've only got 1 point. They've barely looked at being able to get anything from them. And when you have a manager saying this, I don't know how fans are supposed to take it.
It's no coincidence that we're at the bottom. And I've been saying this from even last year. But the problem is, the rest of our build-up play, everything is good. But we have no striker to score the goal. None. Or no midfield player, or no wide player, or no centre-back coming up and scoring from a corner. I thought the 2 centre-backs were outstanding. They headed every ball, but we're not scoring the goals when it matters. And that's the bottom line. And okay, the 3rd goal tonight doesn't really matter. It was the 2nd goal. The 1st goal and the 2nd goal, they're the 2 goals. And I think when we're in the box, no composure, no calmness, no nothing.
If you can't score and you can't defend, that's kind of the key points. I know the recruitment at Portadown is a bit murky and a bit weird. I think that's a whole other conversation. But he's just not getting the performances out of these players. And when you have a team that's so transitional like Portadown, that's not got many people who were there last season who are really knitted into the body of this club, the wool of this club, not enjoying your football and it's not going well, who's going to be one to grab everybody and make these results happen? The community of the team's kind of missing there. I think that the pressure is absolutely on, and you don't want to say this about anybody in their job, but he has to turn it around, and he might not have enough time to do it.
Yeah, you look at the squad, it isn't exactly a battle-hardened squad. I think that's problematic. You're in a relegation battle with a team that are so young. There's a lot of people under the age of 21, 22 there. And then you have a more experienced Ted and Howard Beverland that just doesn't seem to be getting played for some reason. I mean, maybe there's an injury underlying in the background that I'm unaware of, but you think when you're in this sort of position, you want to try and turn to experienced players. But you look through the squad and you start to go, okay, some of them might have been in the league for a while, but there's actually not that many experienced players. And, penny for the thoughts of the likes of Paddy McNally, who desperately wants things to work at Portadown for the whole team, for the fans, who gets it, who's been there a while. But there has been a terrible pattern at the Ports of turning over players. And if Doolan were to go, are they going to do it all again in January? Can they afford to do it all again in January? If they can't, who wants to take this current squad And will they be good enough to turn this current squad around? In which case they could then maybe say, well, it was something the manager was or wasn't doing that caused it. That's the difficulty there. And at the moment, it's pretty bleak if you're a Portadown fan, and it's desperately sad to see, because where I want to give the club its dues, and it's not to be patronising, is you see all the other stuff. They're so bad on the pitch at the moment. Everything else they're doing so well at. And imagine at what they could be if they could somehow marry the two. The work that they've done to give you the sense of history as you come down the tunnel and you see how it's been painted and decorated, and the Hall of Famers and the names that are there and the photographs that are there. It reminds you of Portadown and the history that the club has, the very rich history. Putting on an Oktoberfest and saying, hey, we're going to move it to late kickoff. We want to have an event done beforehand. We want all the supporters to come in and have a great time. We are a community club. All amazing. Having the content that they put out across their social media, where they're doing live streams. They do a very good job of them. And they put out additional stuff where they're trying to give you punditry on a match day that they themselves produce. Does anyone try as hard as Portadown's volunteers to make a club work? I absolutely am desperate for something to change for those people because of how much they put into it, because they're not seeing it back in terms of when they go on a Saturday or any day at the moment and watch Portadown play. It's been a hateful, horrible season, and Paul Doolan will know it too.
If you're a Portadown fan, and I asked them on Twitter about how they felt about the way the seasons went, and at what point do you look at the way things have been going and results and the trends and you say something has to change or somebody needs to step out of the way? Doolan took on a squad that was coming off some historically awful results, and he was able to help them survive and turn it around. He then was either given or he helped to pick some players, and he's not getting the same results. 28 games in the league, he's only won 3, and all them were last season. He looks frustrated and down. I understand that you're saying what fans are seeing, and he's saying we can't score goals and we can't defend. One, that the fans are probably thinking that's your job, buddy, to sort out. And two, how much you feel if you're Shea Connolly or Jordan Jenkins and your manager's like, yeah, I've got no one who can score goals. It's like, well, that's kind of what I'm supposed to do, and I'm trying to do it. And Doolan comes from a background recently of working with young players and training them up the underage teams with the Republic of Ireland. And I wonder, is it a personality thing where the clashes are happening? There was a falling out with Ruddy. There's a falling out with Adam Sally, who's scoring hat-tricks for Ards. And is there just a personality clash where it's gone? And whoever is doing the recruiting, at what point do you say that's not working out either? Very, very tough for Portadown. And a team that's also finding it tough right now is Dungannon. Carrick Rangers, another fantastic win when they took on Dungannon, 3-0. Dungannon just do not lose close games against teams that should be around them. They only do it against the big teams like Linfield and Glentoran. But every time these teams seem to score against Dungannon, their defence just look completely dejected. Like, there's little mistakes there. They seem to be pushing on. But how many times have we seen a goal going against Dungannon, then they all pile in, and Dean Shields is furious? It's all starting to feel a bit repetitive, I imagine, for the Dungannon fan.
Yeah, and that shows you where they're at, because they won in the league against Portadown, they lost narrowly against Linfield, then they beat Portadown again in the cup after extra time, and they could have said, well, we've won a couple of our last matches, things are starting to look up. Thumped by Glenavon, beaten handsomely by Carrick Rangers, thump, crash, bang, wall up, back down to earth they come. And it just seems to be that there's one team in the league worse than them, and that's where they're at the moment. I don't know whether they take on a more realistic, and I don't mean that to be patronising, approach in certain games, and that actually might benefit them if they were to take it more often. And when they come up against teams in the bottom half, like Carrick and Glenavon, well, Carrick aren't in the bottom half, actually, sorry, the Carrick are in the top half at the moment. But when they come up against teams who, historically in the last few years would have been, do they think, Well, we can get at these. Let's be a bit more open. Let's push on. And is that where the gaps are? I'm not entirely sure. I haven't seen enough of them to be concrete with that, but I would suspect there may be some truth in it. They're just very, very not like what they were in the past, Dungannon Swifts. And I get that they're trying to play good football, but where they could point to improvements last season, they're struggling to find them this season. And yeah, they're not far off being in every bit as bad a shape as Portadown, because they're only 2 points better off than them. You just wonder what the patience will be like there from everybody involved, because it just feels like there's a burnout there at the moment, and they're constantly finding it difficult to produce what it is that the manager wants. And at some point, either you say, well, then the players have to change more, or the manager changes, and that'll be a decision that Keith Boyd and company will have to make at some point. It hasn't worked out so far this season for Dean Shields. Let's just call it for what it is. It's been a very, very difficult start to the season. They won what they'll call their biggest game of the season, which was against Portadown. It is only 10 games, but they need to start winning other matches, and they can't just hope to be better than Portadown, otherwise they'll still be in a relegation playoff.
Yeah, away from home in particular, they are just absolutely dreadful. Like, they were able to hold Glentoran to 1 goal at home and Linfield to 1 goal at home, and they, well, 2 against Ballymena, but there was a late goal there. They did beat Portadown at home, but all these thrashings, the Crusaders, the Carrick, the Glenavon, they're all happening. Even the Cliftonville, they're all happening away from home. They completely disintegrate away from home, and this is a team different to Portadown where they have Premiership experience, and they have players with quality like Reece Campbell and Marin. I said before, is brilliant on the ball, and they've got experience. And Declan Dunn's this big, massive keeper, and he's been making mistakes. Not as much as Jethan Barr, who did get dropped for that Portadown game, but at Dungannon, you must be thinking, what do we do now? Because something needs to change ultimately, and maybe style of play. I think personnel, they've got it, and you think.
Well, I think it makes Friday huge for them, because they're at home against Ballymena United.
Yes.
And when you think of that game, David Jeffrey's been under a lot of pressure. He hasn't looked himself at times. It was reported that he, was going to step down after the defeat against Carrick Rangers at home. There's been a lot of talk around him. And then he wins the derby game against Coleraine. And all of a sudden, that youngster, Ross Redmond, remember him, Portadown fans? He's still playing well. I think Ross is the same age as me, a year older, but I like to keep him going and pretend that he's 110. He just feels like he's been playing in the league since, the day of the dinosaurs. But that's a credit to him. But he scores a really good goal, wins the game. I know Coleraine fans will have their own thoughts on chances not taken, post rattled, shots somehow kept out by Sean O'Neill, whatever. Even if you want to say Ballymena United were lucky, which is not what I'm saying, they will argue, well, we darn deserve some luck. It's been rotten so far, having lost 5 of their now 9 league games. So what a bad time to be playing Ballymena United. Is a long way round to getting to that point, because before Dungannon system had gone, well, okay, Ballymena are coming here. They've been struggling. Maybe this is it. Ballymena have got a little shot in the arm off the back of that, and I wonder, could that be the turning point of their season? Dungannon Swifts can't afford to let it be.
For sure. And we talked about it. I feel really uncomfortable bringing this up because there's people that are there, but ultimately this is business. It's a results business. If you were a fan of either of those two clubs, Portadown and Dungannon, and you hear suggestions that Niall Curry's being looked at as a possibility. Niall Curry was at Shamrock Park on Saturday. I don't know why he wouldn't be, of course. He's from the town, big fan, whatever. But, when he's there and there's the odd bit of chanting for him, and clearly he's got his own job, but...
And he's doing very
well.
Very, very
and that makes him even more attractive. It would be a fascinating storyline if all of a sudden there's a race to convince him to give it a go, because even if either of those two teams did fall out of the league, there's the one man that you'd want right now is Niall Curry. He's got an incredible track record even recently, And well, does he want to give up what he has at Dundela? If that was the case, if that was to be suggested, but something to keep your eye on there, because he's someone that is clearly turning heads across the league. And if anybody's going to hit the panic button, where could he lie? But let's go to that game, a big derby, a game we probably should have been talking about earlier if there wasn't drama elsewhere. And the Triple R game, the Ross Redmond redemption tale. If this was a movie, it would have been Ross Redmond at the centre of it. Pretty much booted out of the team after that disaster at the start of the season by David Jeffrey. He's come back. He's been easily their best goal threat via his boot when it comes to swinging in these balls, picking out the big lads that Ballymena have. He's winning back the trust. He's winning back the support of the team. And he was there to whip the ball in with that left foot of his. Coleraine end the game with only 9 men. Oh, the parallels are there. But they were able to get it done, Ballymena. And I don't think Ballymena are a particularly great side. I think they are lacking that bit of talent in some areas. But they will be buzzing about that win. And another tough loss of points for Coleraine. Ballymena will take it for sure.
Oh, of course they will, absolutely. Winning a derby is always that bit sweeter. It moves Ballymena, to 10 points after 9 games. It's not exactly anything to write home about. If you're a Ballymena United supporter, you are rightly saying we've been expecting better. The other way of looking at it is they are 6 points behind Coleraine, who are 5th and have a game in hand over them. They're 3 points behind Linfield, having played a game more than them. So, and even Carrick Rangers, who are 6 points better than Ballymena, have played a game more than Ballymena. What I'm saying is, it shows you the traffic there is in every little intersection of the league. Split it into how many little pieces as you wish, but there are teams nipping at each other's heels, and if they start to get say they were to win at Stangmore Park, all of a sudden they're feeling a little bit better about themselves and saying, can we break into the top half? But hold on, wasn't David Jeffrey wanting to go, or weren't people wanting him to go? It is why, at times that probably people get frustrated at people like me for not being as reactionary as what other people might be. But I try my best to step back and to see it dispassionately, which you can't do as a supporter, and no. I appreciate. And it sort of shows you, people love these narratives after 5 games. Go, oh, he's lost his magic powers and the Emperor's new shoes are over here. Things have been bad at Ballymena United, but, if they are able to pull off a result at the weekend, all of a sudden things, have a bit of a glossier look than they would have done a few weeks ago. So it shows you what things can be like. But if you're Coleraine, though, you'd be a bit concerned, wouldn't you? You've lost 4 of your 10 league games now. And they're a frustrating team, Coleraine, because when you watch them, they can be very good and very, very convincing. And then other times there are matches where they just don't seem to have it, and you're left scratching your head. And last season was very underwhelming from them. This season seemed to suggest we were going to get more, but maybe there's some signs that we're not going to quite get enough.
Yeah.
If you were looking at, can they get to that title charge where they've been previously? Are they maybe not quite at that? Time will tell, because for all the reasons I've said, things can change. But at the moment, they do appear a little bit off the pace.
They're like a Crash Bandicoot boss, and I thought this when I saw them near the start of the season. As in, they come out and they're spinning around fast and you better stay out of their way. But if you can avoid them and hold them off, there's a chance they'll have to sit back and they'll need to recharge. And that's when you do the striking blow. That's when you give them the wee flick on the noggin. They are not streaky, but they have their good patches and their bad patches. And they let teams at them. And when these results happen, it's when they let teams at them. This is a different game. It's a derby game. They get men sent off, passion, whatever. You can throw form out the window when it comes to games like this. And Like, you sounded like me at the start of the season, Michael, the way you were bigging up Ballymena. I've flipped all of a sudden. I think they've got a lot to prove to be up there. And yes, David Jeffrey, like an annoyed teenager, he was sitting at the door with his bag saying, I'm leaving, and if you don't want me, I'm going to go. And they said, no, come on, David, don't do that. He said, well, then that's it. You love me. So he's got his stamp of approval. He's got his hug. And now he can go on with the rest of the season trying to do something. What the expectations are clearly being lowered. But 7th is still there. And as you said, they can go on that run. And thing is, that can go either way, can't it?
It can.
They are only 6 points away from being in a certain place. But in turn, it only takes Dungannon to win that game. And then they're swinging the back into that drama around 11th. So we'll see there. But when we come to the quarter season almost, and I'm not going to play this game, but if we were to sit there and make the best team of the first 10 games of the league so far, a player that I think should be in everybody's team is Mr. Philip Lawry. He is playing the best football of his career. He's more influential than anybody. If you haven't got him in your fantasy team yet, what does he need to do to prove he's the man? He is just magic in that box at the minute. He gets the ball and he fires it in, and I just don't know how he ends up being unmarked so many times. But you know more than anybody, Michael. You're the man with the stat that everybody stole. I am not surprised that their game at Seaview ended 3-2, because of course it was. Two teams who are just pinball machines on grass or on turf or on... Do you call 3G turf? Yeah, it's called turf. 3-2, and Crusaders are the ones sitting there with the points. What could have been, I think, this Crusaders team will think, if they just were a bit luckier with injuries and in some other games. It's going to be a weird season for them.
Crusaders are playing a good chunk of the season without arguably their best centre-half, their best midfielder, and their best forward. Robinson's out all season with that horrific injury that he suffered in the Linfield game. Paul Heatley, through his own silliness, and we've heard his manager subsequently speak about how he wouldn't pick up the phone for a couple of days. He was so heartbroken. He felt he let everybody down when he got sent off against Carrick Rangers and subsequently picked up a lengthy ban for use of his head. And then you've got Ben Kennedy and the injury that he's picked up. And I don't know, people are talking about maybe Christmas time for Ben. We'll see. So you're losing key players across the pitch. Of course, it's going to have an impact on what we see on it. That being said, Crusaders' defence is uncharacteristically leaky. I still think they have more than enough quality in their squad to be better defensively. I went to the game against Carrick Rangers where they conceded 4, and I would go close to saying it's probably the worst defensive display I've ever seen from Crusaders, because they were absolutely miles apart from each other and just seemed to be vulnerable on crosses and set pieces in a way that is not like a Stephen Baxter team. Normally, the one thing you can guarantee is if it's in the air, someone wearing red and black will head it. You know, that's nearly a cert. But
for sure.
But what you also look at is they do tend to go behind in matches, but they are finding a way back. They found a way back in this one, and they found a way to win. And as just seems to be very of the season, Philip Lawry strikes again. It's funny to be in a season where Curtis Allen and Philip Lawry are among the top scorers in the league. I feel like someone's transported me back maybe just a year or two. If either of those two are listening, I don't want to make them feel incredibly old, but it's incredible. And equally, we should say well done, Adam Leckie, because he's the man that really turned the game around.
When you have players of the quality that Crusaders had missing, other people need to step up, and Crusaders, our team, where on paper it feels as though they have a bit of stretch, they have a bit of leeway. A lot of teams would love to have the likes of Johnny McMurray and Adam Leckie in their team. And here, what was with that third goal from Adam Leckie? He just seemed to it was like an angry goal. Can he score an angry goal? He just seemed to boot it in net and go, aye, there, I showed you, ball.
To be fair, Adam,
when you have players like that showing up, you know, so they go again and they make it happen. And talking quickly about Glenavon, you can see 3 goals, you're likely going to lose the game. They scored 2, which is great. Brilliant play from them to get the goals. I mean, what a tombola of a team, Glenavon are this season. It's just you throw the balls into it, give it a big rattle, and you go, "What's it going to be? Oh, we lose 5-1. Oh, it's in a little draw. Oh, it's consistently inconsistent, but you're never too many games away from stringing a few results together. So if you're Glenavon, you're probably frustrated, but do you potentially look at the Glenavon Linfield game that's coming up and think, you never know? Now, all of a sudden, if it's any other team, you think, well, midweek we'll see. Glenavon, I think it's the last team you want to have coming at you after that, because Linfield need to win that, but in turn, it's at home, and Glenavon could just decide, I think we're going to score 5 today.
They are such a... I keep calling them a Jekyll and Hyde team. They're so strange, Glenavon, this season. They've scored 17 goals. That's as many as Cliftonville. But they've conceded 17 goals, which is just 3 better than Newry City. So I think that's it in a nutshell, isn't it? They can hurt you going forwards, but at times they hurt themselves defensively, and they will give up chances. And maybe it's that they haven't got quite the perfect blend in their squad at the moment, if I could be as bold as to suggest that. They have some very young, talented players. They have some wise oil figures there to try and blend in the experience, and maybe they could do with a few more players in between who are coming into their best years rather than at the end of their career or dreaming of one day reaching the careers that those players have had. I feel like they could do
a few 27-year-olds would do the job there.
And I know it sounds very simplistic because you're saying, well, if you have a team full of 18-year-old Lionel Messi's, you're hardly going to really worry about who's 27. But just trying to be pragmatic at it and looking at where their current squad is, I think that maybe they are 1 or 2 light from where they need to be. But I just actually brought it up in front of me. I'm also looking and going, but they have some very good players, and how are they as streaky as they are? But they leave you scratching your head. I think that's the very least we can say about Glenavon at the moment. And the 2 times they played Loughgall, one of the times that a team good enough on paper to beat Loughgall, and Loughgall put them out of the cup.
Cuffed them twice.
And then the other game they put out the kids. That's a thriller.
Michael, it feels like I've got 2 of them already. May as well complete the 3. And to be honest, based on my demographics, most of you should understand this. Like, are they somebody with the golden gun in GoldenEye, where it's like they're either just going to take out an entire team, or everyone's just going to be, well, you had one shot, boom, 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 take you out. You're like throwing knives in Call of Duty. It's like, it looks flashy and you can get lots of great kills with it, but you're leaving yourself open. We'll see.
I appreciate the GoldenEye reference, and if you were one of those people that ran about his odd job, you cheated
with hats. Well, yeah. I'm trying to think who would be the odd job of Ash League. Let's just say it's Warren Point and move on. Okay, it might not be as thrilling as what we had before, but hey, there's always the chance of shocks and everything else in between. Yes, it's another game week here in Irish League football, and of course we start on the Friday, as we seem to do now every week thanks to the streaming via the BBC. And yes, they're finally going to Stagmore Park in that game between Dungannon and Ballymena. Dungannon are sharp at home, but Ballymena were able to get a result here near the start of the season and are clearly the more informed team. What I would love is for there to be like a little chair in the corner of the stand that has like a light on it, like wrestling, and just Niall Curry sitting, looking, twiddling his thumbs as the game goes along. As a goal goes in for Ballymena, and we go to Niall Curry and we have a look at what his thoughts are, But outside of that, needless drama.
I love that you've somehow become Niall Curry's agent and all of this.
I don't know what, it just entered my head. Like
you've turned into Vince Russo. You're going Niall Curry on the pole match. That's niche. That is niche, by the way.
I'm sorry. I feel awful for Dean Shields. Anyway. It's a game that Dean Shields doesn't want to lose, clearly. That's just cliches people like me have to say. Do you fancy either team, or do you think it's going to be a 0-0 draw like I am?
Well, they can't both lose. I look at it as...
Spiritually they can, but yes.
Yes. I look at it as a game that Ballymena United should win, and anything other than that, Dungannon Swifts at this moment in time have to see is an improvement. If they're able to get a draw from this game, take it and move on. I know that sounds incredibly negative. I just think at times they could do, and who am I to tell Dean Shields how to manage a football team? So I'm aware of how silly that might sound. But my own opinion on it is that trying to get back to basics, trying to be hard to beat first is the path to happiness. And they can add the bells and whistles on once they've figured out how to do the simple stuff that at times evades them, probably to his eternal frustration.
I think a bit of the whole banter that they pass and don't do anything round is unfounded, slightly at times. But in turn, what I have seen them sometimes is really focus on, right, we're going to do long balls and target this wing back, and perhaps I feel like I want them to feel themselves a bit more. And as you said about having that bit of experience, yes, there's experience in this team, but I think the difference between a Carrick and the likes of a Portadown, a Dungannon, and maybe a Ballymena is that Carrick have as a David Cushley, great skill, great knowledge, and a fighter, and is willing to go, you mate, go there. Oh, okay, absolutely. And can manage the game from there because they've been in the big games.
Do you know what I really think, is the main thing the Carrick Rangers have that Dungannon Swifts don't have, Portadown don't have? That's goal scorers. And, you can play well and build up, and if you don't put the ball in the net, you're absolutely snookered. And Carrick, certainly looking back and, different seasons, have created lots of chances. Maybe not as many as they've created this season, but haven't been able to convert. And Curtis Allen is just, there's grown men with Curtis Allen posters above their bed now, just going, "You're beautiful, I love you, do it forever, play till you're 50." And Dungannon Swifts need to find somebody who is able to do that for them. And at the moment, that's what they're crying out for. They need a goal scorer. And they're struggling at the minute. So maybe one of their players can grow into that, but that's clearly an area that hasn't been happening for them.
We had the summer of Kirk Miller. Maybe we could have the winter of Joe McCready. We'll just have to see. Let's actually go on to Carrick. And look, I didn't really talk about that game too much against Dungannon. But yes, they're being lauded for all their lovely goals. And yes, Allen's whacking them in and Mitchell's a key cog and all that type of stuff. But they let in a couple as well. And if I'm going to fluff the brow of Niall Curry again, he did go to Carrick and he did score 4. And Carrick had a pretty big first team out for that game. So Carrick have been conceding a fair bit as well, and they're letting a lot in when they do. They kept it tight against Dungannon. Will they keep it tight against Glenavon? And they go to Mourneview for that. I joked about it this last week. Glenavon against Carrick feels like the 30-goal Barry Flynn game on the radio, does it not? It's just like, and there's another one. Like they'll go to the game and they'll be like, well, there's actually been 2 goals since the last time you came to us.
It's 4-3 and we've played 27 minutes. Yeah.
Which you never know what that means. I could get booked for it, but we'll see. That is a strange one because in the battle for 7th, which I'm sure Glenavon will feel they want to be in, and if you're Carrick Rangers, you're starting to believe. I know there's not a trophy for 7th, but they're imagining it in the table. It's like they're little hearts. It's like they're writing 7th. As a kid, people would write like the second name of the people they fancy, going, "Ooh, Peter Clarke." They're writing 7th Carrick Rangers, heart, 36 played. That's what they're doing. But if they do have ambitions to steal somebody's lunch and come up to 6th, they'll need to win this game. How many goals will there be, Mr. Clarke?
I'm laughing because I can just picture having a producer in your ear go, "You have 40 seconds to sum up the first half."
That's usually my life, sir.
Yeah, you're going, well, there's been 6 goals and a sending off. I think the game, I really hope that I'm not giving it the kiss of death and it doesn't end up being a turgid owl affair. I think it could be a very high-scoring game, but I think it'll be a high-scoring game which Glenavon will win 4-2. I think it'll be that sort of match. I would comfortably say Glenavon should be favourites here. You look at Carrick Rangers' last 2 league away matches, they conceded 11 and didn't score against Glentoran and Cliftonville. So we'll say that would actually be quite a fun little trend, wouldn't it? You concede 6, then you can concede 5, then you concede 4. And we can say, well, they're getting slightly better. I think Yeah, I think 4-2 Glenavon. I'll be very specific on that.
I really like that. I like that a lot. I'm going to go 3-1 Glenavon. A team that I said would win by 4 and then got 2 men sent off. Coleraine against Cliftonville. It was a corker to start the season up at the Coleraine Showgrounds. For some reason, it's happening there again. I don't know. I don't do the fixture computer. It hardly matters. Cliftonville will want, I don't know if it's revenge, but they'll want a bit of pride back here. Coleraine are feeling it as well. A draw is probably handy for everybody. Who do you think's going to bounce back out of those two teams?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? I don't predict draws, as people will know, even though it is a completely likely result. I'm going to say an away win to Cliftonville here, 2-1, something like that. I think that the nature of their defeat probably just gives them that bit more of an incentive to bounce back. I understand the stinging nature of losing a derby game, but I feel like Cliftonville are really going to have to make a statement here. They can't afford it. They were the better team last season. You would think that they are still, at least on paper, a better team than Coleraine. So it'll be their job to go and prove that. I appreciate the Bandsiders are at home. A draw is very likely, but because I don't do them, I'll nudge in the way of the away team.
I think it's going to be 4-0 Cliftonville, Ryan Kerr and hatrick. Coleraine are going to be a few men down because of those red cards, particularly at the back. It's just been a bit all over the place for them, and I think Cliftonville will take the lead. Coleraine will go for it, and they'll just snap them, and they'll get it back. It'll be an incredible performance from Ryan Curran. So there's no point predicting 2. I'm going for 4. Newry against Glentoran at the showgrounds for Newry. Could be an exciting game. I've said this a few times before when it comes to teams in the lower part of the division. Newry needs to stop Glentoran from scoring early. If they can do that, they could potentially hold on. The last time these two met, it was at the Oval, and that's exactly what Newry did. Do you give any hope to Newry, or is this about keeping the score down?
If you're to give any hope to Newry, it has to first be about keeping the score down. I would imagine job number 1 is defend well, and job number 2 is be clinical. If you can get a chance, take it. You know, this could be the sort of game where you look at the statistics and you say Newry had 5 shots and 2 on target, and Glentoran had 17 shots and whatever. So it clearly is a game that Glentoran are going to fancy themselves in. And personally, at the moment, I think Newry City are not going to be able to stop them. I could well be proven wrong in that. It's the sort of banana peel after a big win where you can be very quickly humbled. But I don't think Glentoran will slip up just yet, at least anyway. I think they should be able to win at Newry City, and I think they shall do it maybe by 2 or 3 goals. I'll say an away win there.
I don't know why I foresee this, but I foresee it all going well. Glentoran get the first goal, but they get cocky, they're feeling themselves, and that whole hangover, the overconfidence happens. Newry sneaks one, it's all going well. Glentoran are pushing up because they need to win this, and up goes that man Lorcan Ford, the cross to James Thielen, and score a similar goal like he did against Portadown, free as a bird. I'm predicting a shock, and the shock of the season, 2-1, Newry win it late on the counter. Seaview will be the place that will host Portadown, and hopefully, if you're a Portadown fan, the Doolin Revolution starts right here. Feels unlikely. The last time these two teams played at Seaview, Portadown went ahead, Crusaders went to man down, and the Crusaders were still able to win 2-1. After disposing of their Mid-Ulster rivals at Seaview, they welcome Portadown up there. You've got to say, they do well at home. This is a Crusaders win. Probably 3-0.
Yeah, I don't see anything other than a Crusaders win here. I think they have all the tools they need to make it a long, arduous day for Portadown, and I don't see this as the day that Doolin finally has that elusive top flight win this season. So sorry, Portadown fans, but I'm not expecting a happy Saturday for you.
Is that I can't. Is that Niall Curry's music? No. The biggest game of the weekend. Gotta be massive. I've been dying about this. Linfield, after being away from home for so long, or a bit like Christmas, they're spending plenty of days at home after being away. They welcome Larne. Screams a draw, this. But we talk about a statement win last week for Larne, beating Cliftonville. If they can go to what could be a very sad and down on their luck Linfield, and if they can take them out, now is the time. Of course, they could have recovered and get a big win against Glentoran. Do you fancy any of them at a 3 o'clock game? Larne are like vampires. They get at 3 o'clock and the bright lights and like, no! Sunlight! But we'll have to see.
I think Larne would be quite clever to play a game of rope-a-dope here, really.
Hugely.
And just let Linfield cause their own problems. The pressure is on Linfield. We've talked about them being behind, wanting to play catch-up, the frustration of the game that went before. So let Linfield be frustrated and take the chances that come from Linfield's fans, forcing them to up the ante and push on, which will in turn leave spaces in behind. I think that is maybe the key to success for Larne. I'm not saying Larne aren't good enough to go on and just take the game to Linfield, but I think if they're measured here, the chances will be there for them anyway. In spite of that, I have a little feeling that Linfield will win this one. I don't know whether it's the vampire analogy that's converted me or not, Peter, but I think David Healy's men, they might just be able to find the response that they've been searching for here.
Well, have to see for sure. I think this is going to be one of those big games, a bit like Linfield's been in a few times this season. I feel this is going to be similar to that Coleraine game. Larne will feel the pressure in the big games, and I think this will be a 0-0, which would be a fantastic result for Larne, and an even better result for Glentoran, as all the games would be falling rightly for them. So the leaders, can you believe that, in double-digit games of this season? The leaders, Larne, go to Windsor Park. Incredible stuff. Michael, an absolute delight to have you back on the podcast. You've just reminded me on all my awful takes that I had at the start of the season. We predicted with you. Of course, you were one of my most listened to podcasts because we all kicked it off together. So it's great that I'm still finally doing it as the nights get darker and colder. For yourself, of course, if people want to hear more from you, they can do that on Twitter, or they can check out The Score, the place that gets more names interviewed than anywhere else. Any big takes over the past few weeks that people should go out and check on The Score on Spotify?
I honestly think they're all good. I just love talking to all the different people in the Irish League, and not just the Premiership, and hearing what they have to say. My favourite story from the past few weeks is that the top 3 managers in the Championship, based on league position, all live in the same street. I think that that's incredible. Dean Smith, Kieran McGurgan and Niall Curry, another mention for him in this Curry cast, they all live in the same wee half mile. So that, to me, is one of the weird, completely useless things that you might learn on The Score. And I'd invite you along to enjoy the silliness with me every week. And look, congratulations to you, Peter. It's great to see your podcast doing so well, and it's a great addition to the league. So long may it continue, good sir.
You say that for now. Yeah, they all live pretty much right beside Anna's ground, which is really funny, and it's because every time I've went to the Anna, I've covered a game, they've always told me that story. I'm like, it's a great story, it is, but it's just kind of a bit of an odd one. Michael, thank you so much. Go check out The Score. Thanks again for listening again this week. Go check out a game if you're out and about. And strangely no news, but when the stuff on the pitch is so exciting, we're going to cover it. Yes, it's the bit at the end where I do a bit of preambling and I do a bit of plugging, but I am really thankful. I had 10 episodes last week, so I didn't get to mark that as I was too tired when I was recording this bit, so I just wanted to say thank you. I guess this feels like a proper 10th episode after the wee joint one at the top, so it's well over 10 weeks now. I'm still here. I don't think some of the contributors thought I'd be here at the start of the run, but guess what? I got Michael Clarke back. He thought he'd have to do it once. Now he's had to do it again, and maybe more in the future. I do have to say thank you to you for listening. I also have to do the bit where I plug all the important bits. Come on, you can say it with me together. If you like this, you can listen to me wherever you want. If you're listening on Spotify, which stats say you probably are, class. If you want to mix it up, you can listen to it on Apple Music. You can tell that one friend that randomly talks about how he listens to all his podcasts on Amazon Music. Tell him he can listen to it there. The interface is actually quite nice if you decided to get into it. You can hit me up on all those social medias. I don't know why I'd want you to hit me up, but that's what people say. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. It's at Kicking Match for all three. And say it with me again if you haven't done that thing where you talk to a little smart speaker and say, hey smart speaker, play Kicking Match, an Irish League podcast. You really should. It really does work. Even just to prove that I'm not lying, you should do it, because it also counts as an extra play for me. So do it. That'd be great. All your friends and family will think, wow, what a tech savvy man or woman, but probably a man based on my stats. You know how to work technology from 2018. So well done you. Thank you for listening. I will chat to you soon again. Enjoy the games and all the best. Cheerio, toodle pip, bon voyage.